Okay, it's 7 o'clock, and I'll call the meeting to order. Would you please call the roll?
Phil Brown,
Here.
Annie Adams, Leonardo Kovas,
Here.
Kara Dudek,
Here.
Cynthia Hoyle,
Here.
Audrey Ishii,
Here.
Susan Jones, Jeff Marino,
Here.
Craig Schonkweiler,
Here.
Nancy Westcott,
Here.
Lily Wilcock.
Here.
We're all here. So first we need to approve the agenda. Are there any additions or corrections? Is there a motion?
I'll second that.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that's approved. Now we have minutes from the previous meeting. Did everybody get a chance to look at those? They were emailed. Any corrections to that? Okay, is there a motion to approve?
So moved. I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes from last our special meeting. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That motion carries. Public input. Anyone out there from the public? Charlie, want to speak? No. Okay. No public input. Any unfinished business anyone wants to bring up? Nope. Okay. New business. Dockless bike sharing. Kevin.
Okay, good evening, everyone. So we got a relatively short presentation here. Okay, so the way, so for a little outline of my presentation tonight, I'm going to start with sort of a brief background about bike share and the different systems, just in general, and then explain how dockless bike share is different than the systems that have come before it. Then I'll move on to talking about what other communities are doing or how they are regulating dockless bike share systems. And then discuss a little bit about what our approach is, or what the approach that we're looking at is, and then just move on to talk about next steps. So part one, the original bike share system was the white bikes in Amsterdam, and I think that was sort of generation one, and that technically was dockless. It was also perhaps described as maybe a little more of like anarchy, and that system failed pretty quickly. I think all the bikes were confiscated by the authorities. So that was sort of an exercise in anarchy. The second generation, I don't have any images of the second generation, but this would be sort of your pre-smart tech, and these systems would have used just regular cash and checkout systems. But the third generation, so I think what most of us would think of when we think of bike share are these docked systems. So like Velo, I don't know, I'm not French, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, Velo. So like that system, or more closer to home is Divvy. So you have your docks. This is a nice picture because it has the van in the background, and the van takes bikes around and rebalances the bikes to the various docks if more bikes are needed in a certain area or not. And really, this has been the type of systems that have been around for the last 15 years or so. And this is kind of what we've been discussing in Champaign-Urbana when we've been talking about bike share. And these systems are great, but they do have certain drawbacks, namely that the docks tend to be very expensive. It's also kind of a rigid system in that you sort of have to predict the demand. So you have to kind of think, where should these docks go, and you can change around where the docks are over time if you see demand increase in a certain area or what have you, or add more docks, but it's still expensive. They generally require a heavy commitment of public dollars, and I think they might have some equity issues because, again, where you have to place these docks somewhere, so it's hard to place them so you have a network that really is accessible to everybody who wants to access it. I did want to also mention sort of, I guess what I'm going to call the 3.5th generation. So there's a company called Social Bicycles who does sort of it's a dockless, but they have virtual docks. So they'll identify areas where the bikes should be parked, and those are sort of your virtual dock areas. And you need to bring bikes to those areas. You can park them wherever you want, but there's a small penalty if you lock outside of stations. But then there's also an incentive if you find a bike outside of one of those virtual stations and you bring it back to one of them, then you get a bonus of like 50 cents or $1 on your account. So I've liked this system since I've heard about it, but like the full-on dock system, it still requires a pretty good chunk of public money to get these started. So finally, we're here today with the 4th generation. So the whole idea of dockless bikes is you take all the smart technology of the docked system, but you just put it all on the bikes. So you can see, so this here is a locking mechanism. So the bikes can, these are two bikes from 2 different companies, but they're similar. They both have locking mechanisms that allow you to lock the bike up anywhere. The bikes all have GPS units on them, so they can be tracked by the companies. They can give you, they can give you data about where the bikes go. These ones, it looks like there's also a solar panel in here that charges the electric components, and I'm guessing the lights as well. So the benefits of dockless systems are really that you can park them anywhere. When you have a system that relies on docks, I mentioned some of those drawbacks. Another thing I didn't mention is you can get to a dock and all the docks are full, and then you have to go a few blocks away, and then your convenient bike ride to your meeting suddenly becomes I'm 10 minutes late to my meeting, so that's kind of inconvenient. So let's see. Also, one thing we've noticed is that we've been contacted, and by we I'm talking about City of Urbana, City of Champaign, and the university have all been contacted by these companies because they are willing to pay for these systems with no public money involved. So they're funded enough where they can bring the whole system to a community, and there's no upfront cost to the communities, which has really been, I think, what's held us, probably the big thing that's held us back in the past. And I think there's potential for these to be more equitable in that these bikes can go pretty much anywhere in town, and for most of them, you do need a smartphone, but I know that some of them, like Lime Bike, you see one of their bikes back here. I know when they presented, when their representative spoke to the Champaign City Council, they mentioned that they have set up a system where you can type in just a number, or you can call a number on a regular phone, and you can access a bike that way. So since I'm talking about how you access the bikes, so they have smartphone apps, and that'll tell you where all the bikes are since they have GPS on them. So you can, I'm sure all the apps work a little bit differently, but you select a bike, you say, I want this bike, and then you go up and you can unlock it with your phone, and then you ride it for a bit, and then you lock it back up, and then you're done. And you get charged 50 cents to, I think, $2 for some amount of time. I think these systems aren't without some, I guess, drawbacks or concerns. And the big one, I think, that we've talked about in our, in the small group that's been meeting is parking. And when you say you can park a bike anywhere, well, then you can park a bike anywhere. So there's concern that people might park these so that they block sidewalks, block entrances to buildings, be thrown in the Boneyard Creek, which, that probably would happen to some of them. But there are ways to, if you're going to regulate these, there would be ways that you could probably mitigate some of the drawbacks. I I don't think there's much concern for like abandonment of bikes because they do have the GPS units on them, so they should be able to be picked up. But those are just a couple of the drawbacks. Some of you may have seen the scary pictures of big piles of these bikes over in China. I don't think that would happen here because the amount of bikes that we'd be talking about would probably be in the low thousands and not in the tens of thousands. Some of those systems have a lot of bikes over there. I couldn't resist. I'm calling part 2 dockless in Seattle. But there are other places that are doing it too. But we've looked at Seattle and Washington, D.C. and at South Bend. And they're all using a pretty similar, they're using a similar regulatory approach in that they're all looking at fleet regulations, so things like size of fleet, maintenance, and the quality of the bikes. Things like parking, where can you park, how do you remove bikes that are parked improperly, and importantly, how do you educate folks who are using the bikes on where to park properly. And another thing they address is local staffing. Most of the companies will have local staff presence. And they talk about redistribution of bikes if that's needed. And then another item would be data collection and sharing, which as a planner, I see great potential for data as long as privacy concerns are addressed, and that's something that the data would need to be anonymized, and but I think there's great potential for the data, for the information we can glean from this data, let's say. These cities also regulate insurance and what I'll just call legal stuff, and then also finally fees. And some of them, like in Seattle, there's a bond that operators have to put up, and that bond can then be drawn on if there's, say, damage to public infrastructure that arises as from use of the bikes. This is a picture from Seattle right after they, I think right after they got their regulations in place and got some dockless bike share bikes. And I do want to point out that it seems like these systems, they've only been around, or they've been around less than a year in the U.S., but it seems like all the operators that we've talked to, or sorry, all the municipal folks we've talked to in the cities where these are operating have had very positive reactions to the systems. Something else they've been doing, this is actually not something that the companies did in Seattle, but Seattle came out with regulations on where to park. So the Seattle Bike Blog came up with a graphic that said, here's where you can park. So our approach would be probably something similar. If we choose to go the regulatory route, we can always choose to not regulate at all. But our approach would be probably, or if we do regulate, it would be similar to the cities that we've looked at. Initially, we had a large group, including folks from Champaign, the University, Urbana, CUMTD, the Regional Planning Commission. We even had some folks from St. Joe and Savoy that met a few times to discuss dockless bike share. But we've had a smaller group with just Urbana, Champaign, and the University, since we're the folks who are going to actually have to regulate these, and we'll have the regulatory authority. We've been getting together to sort of come up with a common approach that we can all agree on, because we will ultimately be the regulatory agencies. And we're not sure what the final regulations are going to look like. That's why we're bringing it here. That's why in Champaign. They went to their city council study session a couple weeks back, and we'll probably be doing the same if that's the direction we get from BPAC. So we're not sure if it would be a joint licensing agreement or if we need to have separate agreements for Champaign, for Urbana, and for the university. I think the group that's been meeting is we're strongly in favor of a common approach if we can make that happen. It just seems to make sense. There would be probably a lot of efficiencies that could come out of that. But that's really my brief overview, but I did want to ask a few questions in a font that you can read this time. So I have 3 questions. The first is, should we regulate these dockless bike share operators or not? And then if so, what aspects would be the most important ones to regulate? And then should we bring this to City Council for a study session in the very near future? I can leave those up so we can have a discussion if you like.
Thanks, Kevin. Okay, let's take them one at a time. Anybody have any thoughts on should we regulate it?
Can I ask Kevin a question first?
Oh,
Sure,
yeah.
You spoke to people from Seattle and other places that they have these?
Ben, Leroy, and I'm not sure. Lily, did you speak to them? Okay, so Ben, my counterpart in Champaign, has done a lot of heavy lifting on this, and so has Lily. So they're really the experts. But yes, they spoke to folks in Seattle.
Do you know Lily, if the Seattle folks addressed the equity issue that comes up with bike share that's on docks? Is that addressed by dockless bike sharing?
No, they have not figured that out. Something that we've discussed, and we don't have a concrete plan for it right away. We would like to discuss it after implementation, and if everything kind of looks okay, we'd like to discuss ways of making it easy for people without smartphone access to pay cash or have prepaid transit cards that would include dockless bike share. So there'd be ways that one person, whether they have a bank account or not, or whether they have a smartphone or not, they'd be able to use and check out the dockless bike share. So that's been something that we've been talking about.
And then, do you know if the distribution issues are addressed by dockless bike sharing? So do you still need to have people gathering up bikes and moving them around to places?
So it is required. We're talking about it being required. And it will be required in the university's concession for them to redistribute. And we're actually working right now at the university and creating designated redistribution spots. So we're looking at places like, we're looking at places for like surface parking lot parking spaces. We're looking at spaces next to bike racks to also encourage people to use racks and bike parking areas. So we're looking at all of that, which, thank you, Leo, for a lot of the work from the bike census is actually making it a lot easier for us to work on that.
Craig?
Oh, no. Okay. Push the button hard enough. So do we know a minimum number of dockless bikes that they're talking about? I can foresee if it's a small number, then redistribution becomes a huge issue. If it's a larger number, obviously, then redistribution, on, I don't know how often they're talking, would be less concerning, I think. Do you know if there's a minimum number that they're talking about coming in with? And do they size that to a community, I guess?
They do, and in most places it seems like it's at least a couple hundred bikes, and that's probably looking at per operator. And we would have an option of saying you need to have a minimum number, but I think they're probably going to bring a fair amount of bikes because just to make it financially feasible, you're probably not going to have an operator come with 40 bikes and have it worth their while to develop all the apps and all that. So
just to add to that, process, at least on the university end, will be able to be revised within 6 months or a year, depending on if any issues arise. And I'm sure there's going to be some kind of thing in Champaign, and we should discuss whether Urbana should do that too. I would hope you guys would want to have something very similar. That way it's not really confusing to operate a business in the community. But another thing too, as well as what Kevin said, is though we could discuss the option of having a cutoff for maximum amount of bike operators, but more than likely, and this is what happened with car share, we would expect that a lot of operators, there's not going to be a lot of customers who are going to sign up for 6 companies to be a member of 6 companies. They're going to sign up for 1 company. And so a lot of operators might not be here in 2 to 3 years. And there'll probably be maybe 2 or 3 operators, kind of like Uber and Lyft, that will really have the lion's share of the customers. Because the operators will be required to have employees on the ground and will be required to recover bikes that are out of compliance if they're in crosswalk or within a certain amount of hours during business days and also at night. So there are some constraints, at least in the university concession, that are going to be required. We're probably going to have just maybe require a couple more things and maybe what you guys might be interested in requiring, but we'll be definitely telling them to do that. If they're going to operate on the university, they're probably going to operate, in Urbana and Champaign, so hopefully it'll protect a lot of folks from bike waste.
Jeff?
So I guess to Craig's question, I chatted with Ben today about some of the issues that he first saw with this. And he said that when Champaign was first approached, that each company was proposing 1,000 bikes. So there'd be 4,000 bikes potentially in town. And the concern wasn't, are there going to be enough bikes in downtown for people to use it? The concern was more about if somebody goes from downtown to their friend's house in Cherry Hills, and then their friend, they drive to a movie, and the friend drops them off on the way back, and that bike is stranded out in Cherry Hills. How long is it going to be there before somebody moves it back to downtown, or somebody checks it out and then rides it somewhere else or back to Cherry Hills? So that, in that regards, the question was kind of about, if these stray bikes are around town, who's going to redistribute them back to the appropriate locations? And that's where I think maybe the on-site management, or I don't know how the regulations would be set up to address that.
Yeah.
So,
oh no, sorry.
So I guess just to your first questions, I'd be in favor of regulations to address those oddball issues.
Yeah. And just looking at this matrix of regulations, at least in Seattle, they say that the city can move a bike or any bike that hasn't moved for 7 days, and that I imagine when they went out and moved the bike, then they would draw down on that bond to pay for their staff time to go out and move those bikes. But you could also set it up where the company just needs to send out their local staff and move it.
You'd think that part of the app could be you'd earn a credit to ride the bike back from Cherry Hills to town and earn a credit or two and just get people to do that. At least.
Right.
Some of it.
I think this will be a very interesting study in free market economics. If there's like 7 or 8 companies that come to town, we'll probably see a lot of innovative ideas like that
And
come to the fore.
I think some dockless bike shares have like service areas where you aren't supposed to take the bike outside those. You can get penalized for that. Do you know if they've been talking about any of those, or if they would want input on where they should be?
Well, we haven't been talking about that.
It's geofencing.
Yeah.
In some larger cities, they have zones in which you operate, not outside of which you would operate. I think we may be too small for geofencing.
So most of the companies that I've talked to, all of them have talked about having geofencing in our community, and it's more of their protecting their business interests.
Okay.
Because if someone brings the bike and it may or may not be stolen, but they take it to Thomasboro, and So they would want to be alerted in those kinds of situations where bikes are being taken to, an outlying community outside of the service area that they're really participating in, and that could probably be considered stolen at that point. But that's another thing that most companies are considering and talking about.
And
You weren't requiring it, they were going to do it.
Yeah, so the idea is to regulate, or at least this is what the university were trying to do, is regulate the things that we're worried that they won't take care of, and not necessarily tell them how to do their job about stuff that they should take care of or they want to take care of. So,
as far as enforcing the 7-day, if that's what we made it, would it seems like it would be easy enough to draw that information from an app if they had that interface for us. Could just say identify all bikes that have not moved in 7 days. Do you think they'd be open to something like that, or?
I don't see why they wouldn't be, and it could just be a matter of there could be an automatic message that gets sent to whoever the local contact is that says, these 5 bikes haven't moved in 7 days. They need to be moved. So,
and I guess I don't know if you'd always want to move the bike if it hadn't been moved in 7 days, or if it was just in a bad area, or
They're not going to get moved for 7 days over breaks.
yeah, or summer.
or if it was inoperable. Yeah.
Or
Okay, Annie. Sorry.
I would just like to say I'm deeply concerned about dockless bike share systems, but I also didn't believe bike share systems would work. And so let's take that into account. When I lived in Chicago, they introduced the Divvy bike system, and it is wildly successful. The city of Chicago runs it. They own it. They make money on it. They do make money on it from tourists. They have a very tight return. It's 30 minutes. When you're riding that bike, you are constantly concerned about getting that bike to the dock. We do live in a tiny city, geographically wise. So, I mean, I've ridden those bikes miles upon miles, and you go from dock to dock to dock to dock to get to your destination.
Well, but you can pay to keep the bike longer.
You do, well, you do it for free. Yeah, you're basically every 30 minutes you dock it, and then you get a new bike, and you dock it, and you get a new bike. And so there's that. I was recently in Washington, D.C., and I saw all these bikes falling over on the sidewalk, and I was like, what the heck is going on here? And D.C. they do have a dock system, but they also just introduced a dockless bike system. And so the bikes, because of wind, had fallen over, because people were just parking them willy-nilly on sidewalks, because technically with a dockless bike, you can just park it in the bike lane and walk away. And there is no incentive to dock it. There's no incentive to park it at a bike rack. There is zero incentive to return it to wherever, because you're just done. You've made it to the math building, and now you're just going to park in front of the math building and go. And then hopefully when you come out of your class, it will just be there waiting for you. So those are my issues. And the other issue I have is there's not enough parking on campus right now for bikes. There's not enough campus even in the city of Urbana. I mean, the bike rack I just parked at is absolutely full. So those are my concerns with, and there's also, Dockless Bike Fail, a Twitter account, devoted to it. So those are my concerns with it, and I just feel like if we are going to do this, we should devote resources to it. Redistributing bikes is great. When you get off an Amtrak and to know that there's going to be a bike waiting for you, that the bike's not going to be in Savoy. That's the whole point of a bike share system, is that you get off the train and you can count on a bike being there. I totally get that it's inexpensive. I understand how expensive it is. I understand the politics of we're going to put a dock, we're going to take away one parking spot and put in a dock, and people freak out, because you're putting 20 bikes where there used to be one car. I understand that, but I'm deeply concerned about this. But again, take that into account. I didn't think people would use bike share, and not only do people use bike share, it makes money, and I use it, and I really like it. So, but I also like the advertisement of when I'm in the city, I see the docks, and I'm like, oh, that's right, we got bike share. Oh, there's bike share, and you move around. So, and then that's what comes to the equity issue, which is why you create a system of close to each other and you slowly move out, because you want a network that's very close to each other and you slowly move out. but you do have equity issues with that because you're going to build in the most densely populated areas first. So that's all I got to say. So yeah, yes, we should definitely regulate dockless bikes.
So, Bill.
Cynthia.
So we did a report on this. I think it would be helpful, Kevin, to provide that to the members of BPAC that overviewed bike share in this country and in other countries because it's been operating for quite a bit longer in other places. And the piles of bikes that you see are a result of companies that have gone bankrupt. And there's a lot of serious discussion about whether or not the models that are currently being used are sustainable. They've got initial upfront funding, but the question is, are they charging enough to actually maintain and operate the systems? So that's why I think bonding's really important, because I don't feel that the taxpayers in the city of Urbana should be stuck with the job of dealing with these bikes. And somebody said, well, when they go bankrupt, they'll just sell them off. And I thought, well, you're taking it for granted that there will be somebody in charge of selling off their inventory who would go around and round it up. We could just be left with bikes. And so I think the bonding is important. And I think requiring maintenance is important because these systems have been notoriously bad at keeping their bikes in good repair. And some of them have been better than others. On the parking issue, I think we do have to address that because they're not actually locked up. They're only locked to not roll. They're not locked to anything. And so that means you can just pick them up and carry them off. So I think we should do that. And one of the other options for that, which I saw in Amsterdam, is painting the rectangular areas in spaces that you have where bikes could be parked with signs that say you can park bikes here, and those are perfect for the dockless bike share, but you still have the opportunity then to address the bikes that are just parked wherever and could be in the way. And rebalancing, I'm really happy to hear the university's going to be asking for that, and I think maybe not requiring incentives, but suggesting that incentives are a good idea for helping rebalance and address some of the other issues. And I think the equity issue, Divvy Bikes worked on that quite a bit, and what they have done is similar to bus passes for social service agencies that we have here, which is you can provide membership and a certain amount of opportunity to access systems through programs with social service agencies. They are more flexible in location and access, and I think that's an opportunity that these systems provide that I hope will help people in the community who want and need bikes to have them. The other thing, when I was in Amsterdam this summer, they were in the process of requiring the bike share system, dockless bike share, to leave. They had had too many problems with them. And one of the things I noticed, because we rented regular bikes, but their bikes were small. And so I don't know, maybe as they, next generation, they'll do bigger bikes, but these are coming out of China, and people on average are smaller in China than they are here. So I would have trouble with some of the bikes that I saw riding them. So those are just some issues for us to contemplate. And absolutely we should regulate them, and I listed off the things I think. And I don't know about taking it to the City Council for a study session. I think that's sort of something staff needs to decide. If we are going to have a licensing agreement, I would think you have to take it to the City Council. So if that's needed, then we should do a study session with them.
Lily?
Okay, so I have a couple things I want to address really fast. On the Nuff Bike Parking Student Sustainability Council, seeing this dockless bike share progression has funded denser covered bike parking shelters in the core of campus. There might be, I'm working on it. There are a couple things that with a new program that we're working through on the campus. So don't get mad at me if you see a delay or two, but it's going really fast for me.
Only one or two?
So true.
That'll be great.
I would really say that DC and Amsterdam are really, really interesting things, and I've been studying up a lot on this, but we should give towns our size a slightly different look. Ben Leroy in Champaign did go to Notre Dame / South Bend, Indiana, to study what's been happening with Lime Bike, and for the most part, he took a ton of pictures. He tried to find all the good and the bad and the ugly, and the ugly wasn't the worst. The good was some things that you'd probably see that I think maybe a couple of Good Samaritans might have moved or something like that. We're not quite sure, but there was a lot of really interesting things. But for the most part, there was some things that we could live with, and also some things that we might foresee as problems on campus. So that was really helpful. Our campus is very different from Notre Dame. There's, yeah. So many times, and the structures of the buildings are completely different. But so I think it would be very interesting to see what it would look like in Champaign-Urbana. Something that we've seen is really encouraging. Also, Seattle, you saw the pictures. Kevin had a picture on there. They have sidewalks that I can only dream of around here. We've been cutting into our parkways forever, You gotta widen the road in the 50s and 60s. So important. So we don't have those kinds of, so we're really looking into ways that we're going to expand that, but I think it's really easy for us to find a lot of alternative funding, especially in infrastructure, when we have that. And we saw that kind of in Divvy. Remember when Divvy was new, City Council was really dragging their feet on expansion on the Lakefront Trail and fixing things up, and the 606 was taking forever, and there was always like a hang-up everywhere. I was working at the Park District at the time. There was always a problem with the 606. As soon as Divvy came up, all of a sudden it was like the hot new thing, and every councilman, every alderman and their sister really wanted to throw money at this kind of stuff. So I think it is really a great tool to see things and also see the problems too. So if we need more bike parking, it'll be fairly evident right away. I'm really happy that the students have given us this money to experiment with denser bike parking and covered bike parking on campus, and we're hoping to, we have in our university concession agreement a sample education plan for the companies to implement. And at every point of the way, they say they need to work with the university on education plans and also incorporate that into the app. But we're also planning on doing the red zone thing, but maybe it might be green or blue. I don't want to put red on concrete. No one does.
Orange
That
and
will
blue.
fade. No.
Well, one quick note, by the way, what the state of Washington requires helmets, so Seattle is not a great comparison point for a number of these factors, because the requirement for helmets is also what killed their bike share that had docks. So they're odd in that regard compared to the rest of the country.
On the flip side, when they implemented this, you saw a lot of maybe not your typical bikers in Seattle biking, which was really exciting. And their version of Active Transportation Alliance, or their version of Champaign County Bikes, was pretty excited with the initial results. And but they were all helmetless, women riding down the street and trying it out. And I think for Seattle, that was probably a really great thing to expand and make it easier, is maybe helmet enforcement wasn't as strict as they say it is. And so it really opened doors up for people to try biking. And I'm a big believer of making it easy for people to just try it. I think that some of us have really benefited from the privilege of trying bikes, and so that's why we really like them, and we do this kind of work. So that's kind of exciting. The requiring maintenance, we will be requiring the bikes to last a certain time period, which we're always open for comments and suggestions, but at the university we're talking about 2 to 3 years required. So that's another opportunity for us to talk to the bikes. I did go to a conference this past fall, and I saw a lot of these bike share companies, and they have greatly improved the quality of their bikes due to those requirements from bigger cities and the option of facing fines. Another thing about bankruptcy and bike share, I don't think Uber or Lyft have ever made a profit. They still run huge deficits, but they have piles and piles of venture capital money. So these might still have piles and piles of venture capital money pretty far down the line, and I'm glad that it seems like the university is going to try to regulate this, and Champaign's going to try to regulate some of this, because there will probably be bikes for a while. We're just not sure what it looks like. And the biggest thing that I'd really like to emphasize is we really don't know what it's going to look like. And it's almost important for, we try to plan as much. You know, Kevin had a lot of really good scenarios and a lot of very colorful language about what could happen. And we're planning for that, but you don't know what it's going to happen with these, because it's so new, and our town is not Seattle or Washington, D.C., so we don't know if it's going to work, if it's not going to work. But these permits is going to be, Champaign's calling it the pilot permit process, and I mean, our concession is only a really temporal, like really short thing that has to be renewed all the time. Even Annie Adams, even Annie Ann's or Sbarro still has to renew their concession all the time. Espresso Royale has to do it. So we'll have that opportunity to renegotiate anything that is a problem.
I think I saw one of the DC bike shares had electric assist as part of it. Have you heard anything about that? That seems like it could bring up additional issues and training issues and education issues.
But I think
and
those
stuff.
are docked.
Those are docked, because they have to be charged or something.
Well, and they're a lot more expensive, too.
There is only one dockless bike share that has approached us with different ability bicycles and e-bike options. That is Zagster. They're getting into dockless bike share, and they have a lot of experience with docked bike share that has provided them with a lot of experience working on college campuses and providing accessible bikes. So that's something that we started talking to about companies, but there's obviously a huge cost to that I don't think not every school is as concerned about it. But so we're trying to work through that right now. We're working with DRES and talking to them.
And then, so are you also discussing regulating numbers? Because if you let them flood the
Yes.
market, it seems like we're more likely to have problems. So is there some way
Yeah.
to come up with what the right number of bikes is and cap it at 500 or 1,000 per company or something?
So I don't know what City Urbana wants to do, but the university would like to see a cap somewhere around 500. But we would wait to make a final decision to see what Urbana and Champaign does.
And you're talking per operator, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you imagine that this would be one of the things that Urbana and Champaign would do, like a joint ordinance on, try to, like we do with the taxi regulations?
I think that would make
That was the hope.
the most sense.
And how far along are they? Are they going forward with trying to draft an ordinance at this point?
They are, and I'm waiting to see what they come up with. Because if we can, if they come up with something that we can agree to, then we might just be able to
I think what Champaign would like to
go
do would
along
be
with
do an
that.
intergovernmental agreement between
yeah.
the university, Urbana, and Champaign, so that there's some standard restrictions or regulations on all the companies, and then do individual license agreement with each operator. So then Champaign would have an agreement individually,
That makes sense.
and then an agreement with all of the other agencies on how those agreements would look like.
Okay. Annie?
The one thing I would like to say about a bike share system, and one thing that I think is really exciting, is when people see Divvy bikes, you're no longer an individual cyclist. They actually see the Divvy bike first, and they respect the Divvy bikes because it's like, oh, it's a Divvy bike, it's a cyclist. And I think the city of Urbana, the city of Champaign, the University of Illinois are almost these three unique ecosystems. And what I think would be exciting is if we went with one vendor, and I think it's really important that the bikes are really good and they work really well, and that they're branded really well. And basically, it will almost bring those three unique things together, and it will be one resource that these three unique entities will share, and it actually creates this really interesting visual experience when you're walking through cities and you continually see the same bike by you over and over again. And that is easily my favorite thing about riding a Divvy bike, or even being in the city of Chicago, or being in Indianapolis on the Indianapolis bike share system or these other places, you are no longer this like individual on your own fighting this ecosystem of cars. You are part of this like larger system of bikes, and people actually do respect these divvy bikes in a different, the bike shares in a really different way. So that would be my one big request, would be almost if we went with one vendor, we branded them really well, and we made sure they were good bikes, and it would be this thing that almost brought these three different, they're almost like three cities together to one, to almost one sort of ecosystem. And it really does raise the awareness of all types of cyclists doing all types of things, and so I am all for bike share.
Sue.
I'm not sure that people would, I think you could have three different ones and they would see them all as, oh, those bike share things. I don't think they would even have to be the same brand, because they look weird enough and unique enough.
They do, you're right.
I think people would just think,
Just
oh, it's one
like
of those bike
your
shares.
cargo bike.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody knows it's Susan Jones. For sure. It's well branded.
There's somebody else who has my model, so
They're new. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Hey, Leo.
Some folks mentioned regulating like the number of bikes per operator. It seems like it would make more sense to just regulate the total number of bikes allowed in the ecosystem. Because you could, if you said, 500 bikes per operator, you could end up with 10, 15 operators ostensibly, and way more many bikes than you could handle. And then just capping the total number of bikes might naturally lead to a system like Annie mentioned, where there's just one operator because only one or maybe two operators can sustain themselves financially working under those limits. So that's just two regulation things, I would say.
I think those are definitely good points. I think the only drawback I could see to that is if we get a lot of operators that want to operate in town and we've set the max number so low that they can't really operate profitably or sustainably. But that's the only drawback I think I could see to that. And I don't know, I don't know if that's a possibility but that's just something to think about.
Well, I think though, if they would need more bikes than we can handle in order to be profitable, then I don't think they belong here. So, we set the number of bikes at whatever, the two cities and the university can properly regulate given our staff and whatever else we need to do. And if that doesn't work for them, then it just doesn't work.
No, I get that. All I'm saying is that if we said there can only be, say, 500 bikes, that's really low, but say we said there can only be 500 bikes total, and you get 10 operators that want to operate here, then you're saying you can, essentially each one can have 50 bikes, and that's just going to, I guess then you probably wouldn't have 10 operators. You probably only have a couple that come here. But I think you just be, I don't know. It's an interesting
Lily?
Yeah.
thing to think about on both
First,
sides.
just to address this, because it's on what we're talking about, we're not sure which companies are really great and which ones aren't. There could be some bad apples and there could be some good apples, and kind of like buying a house, you don't know until you go in and you look. It might look really great on the internet, but maybe that's just the Instagram lens they were using that day. So we would be really hesitant to pick the winners, already. And it doesn't strike as very fair, because I think there could be some really great companies that would operate a quality bike and maintain it and have staff on the ground, and they might not be the ones that I would think today are going to be that company. And we might have problems with, maybe they hire bad staff, or problems with maintenance or responsiveness, or we're also requiring a 24-hour contact line. Maybe they don't do that, or they don't do it right. So those are issues that I would feel like this is so new and operating in so many cities, it would be really hard to make a really, it's almost like an educated guess. And I think the educated guesses that we would have so far are a lot farther from like a consumer report than it would be just kind of like put the names in the hat and pull out a couple. So that's a huge hesitation I would have. The second thing, Annie, just to address having that one operator thing, we've benefited a lot in the community from having a lot of operators and people get to choose. It's how we did things like car share, and I would have to say that maybe it wouldn't be very politically feasible too. A lot of people do like having options, and the town, South Bend did have a single operator that they chose, and I can't emphasize this enough. Every time we do pick someone, there's usually, new technology develops in the future, like 2 years down the road, and there's something we'd really like to try, and we're tied into this. And we've had those other schools at, I talk about the university a lot because that's what I do, but I've talked to a lot of schools and their operations. Some schools have gotten locked in, like Purdue is finally bringing dockless bike share. They have a really solid dockless bike share on their campus company. Really great group of students. Well-funded, great quality bike, and they were locked in with Zaxter for a 3-year contract, and their hands were tied. They couldn't do anything, and so that's a huge problem that I would hate for us to be stuck in that situation where we have a really great option, but we can't do anything about.
Yeah, I think I'd like to see 2 or 3 or even 4, and then if you price the bond right, it seems like your penalties would basically take somebody out of business if they're not doing a good job. If they have to put up a $10,000 bond, or I don't know how the economics of it works out, but if it disappears pretty quick, then they're going to say, well, it's not working there. But if you take out the bad company now and then you can keep the good 2 or 3. I think that would be pretty good. Any other comments? Questions, thoughts?
I wanted to make one point. When Ben brought this to the Champaign City Council, it seemed like their council thought a lighter hand on the regulation would be better than trying to set all the regulations at least up front. And I think one of the benefits Lily mentioned, calling it sort of a pilot program. If you say we're going to reevaluate this in 6 months or a year, then you can address some of the issues you may not have foreseen at the beginning. Hopefully before they become a huge issue. So, just some final thoughts there.
One last thing to add: the university probably won't, for various reasons, pursue something like a bond option. We'll have our concession agreement that will have fines and penalties built into it, like we usually do. But the bond thing we have discussed, and it became very difficult to break down costs between the 3 agencies. So something that we're talking about now at the university, and I know Kevin and Ben have talked about it, is maybe having the permitting process, having fines for the company individually instead of the bonding and using it as a savings account or something.
Yeah, it still kind of worked the same, just different mechanisms.
Yeah, absolutely. But I want to clear that up because we can't.
Okay, anything else on that issue? Do you have enough from us to move forward?
Yeah, I think this was
Okay.
this was a great conversation. So thank you all.
All right, thank you very much. All right, Vision Zero, Audrey.
Okay, thanks. We've talked about Vision Zero in the past. It's been incorporated in our Urbana bicycle master plan, and we're hoping to incorporate that into the PED plan. But we haven't really gone over what Vision Zero actually is. I think a lot of people may know it started actually in Sweden, and it's part of the Safe Systems approach to design that Europe, the Safe Systems initiative that Europe has been utilizing, and it's been growing very rapidly in the U.S. It's fundamentally a different approach to traffic fatalities and serious injuries. It's important to note serious injuries are included there too, as things that cut into quality of life and productivity and years, as well as years of life. We all are familiar with an experience with Vision Zero in that the airline industry definitely has been operating under Vision Zero forever. We're not satisfied with having even a single airline crash, whereas with our car highways, we have about the equivalent of 2 jumbo jets a week crash. We have around 100 people killed a day in the highways. So we are familiar with what Vision Zero is, but why it hasn't been adopted by the car industry is part of just the evolution of the car industry. But now what we're finding is that taking the approach that no car accident is actually an accident. It's a crash, and a crash has causes beyond just an individual cause. There's always a design and an entire system that has allowed for that human error to become a fatality or a serious injury. So this has been, Vision Zero has been around since 1994, so they've developed quite a bit of experience with that. So do we need Vision Zero in Urbana? Let's take a look at the traffic deaths that we've had in the past. Okay, I don't have all the statistics for 10 years, and these are all obtained from the RPC reports on traffic injuries. If we look at the last 10 years, of course, dividing by 8, because there's only, or 7, there's only seven years shown there. There's an average of 2.3 deaths, fatalities per year in Urbana, and about a little bit more than half of them are pedestrian or cyclists. Compared to nationwide, around 1 in 5 is a pedestrian or cyclist, which is actually a shockingly high number when you think of how few would be actually caused by the pedestrian or the cyclist, and how relatively rare they are in the transportation system. And also what's shocking is that this is an increase. It's 2.5 times higher than it was the previous 10 years before 2007. So I think that we can argue that Urbana does need to be looking at Vision Zero and saying none of these deaths, let alone the injuries, which are 4 or 5 times the number of deaths, the serious injuries, are acceptable, and we need to look at what can we do in Urbana to change that. Okay, Vision Zero is endorsed by or compatible with several other initiatives that the United States that are more homegrown, but they acknowledge Vision Zero, or they specifically endorse it as one of the ways to meet the goals of these other initiatives. Fed Highways has towards 0 deaths. There's Road to Zero by the National Safety Council and US DOT. The Safe System approach, which is the kind of the global international umbrella. Safe Routes to School, which we're very familiar with here with Cynthia's work in that project. Walk-friendly communities, which we've talked about for our pedestrian plan, becoming a walk-friendly community, and the Urbana Bike Master Plan. This website is a wonderful mine of information on Vision Zero. One of the, it's very easy to remember, PedBikeInfo, pedbikeinfo.org, and they have just fantastic links to all these other organizations and initiatives that are coordinated with Vision Zero, including Safe Routes to School, Vision Zero toolboxes, the Department of Transportation towards 0 deaths, Road to Zero, Prevention Institute, a health equity roadmap for getting to 0 in every community, as well as the research. So this is a fantastic website to keep in mind as we move towards this. It links to, and there is a very strong emphasis on equity in all the Vision Zero approaches, including enforcement that we'll talk about in a moment. And enforcement is, as many of you probably know, is a topic right now in Urbana, whether enforcement is equitable. So for the walk-friendly community assessment, Vision Zero is one of the recognized steps to applying for a walk-friendly communities designation. Okay, safe routes to school. Vision Zero is a partner and clearly would be a wonderful way to ensure that children are walking and bicycling safely to school. So the adoption by cities that started around 2010 with Chicago being the very first city to adopt Vision Zero. One of the neat things that I like about it is it's they don't have a specific logo. You don't have to adopt a certain logo to be Vision Zero. It looks like every city has branded it its own way. And so you'll see lots of different ones. But as well as the strategies and the task force that people will devise will vary too by cities. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. It's basically a fundamental change in how you just see the transportation system and where you assign, how you decide that you're going to change it so that there's 0 fatalities. The Vision Zero cities right now, a year ago in November, Cynthia forwarded one of the handouts that I gave you, which is the Columbia, Missouri Vision Zero strategy document. And I thought that was really neat. They were rather frightened by a large number of fatalities in 1 year. It's funny how often these things just need to be bunched. You can have 0, 2 years, and then suddenly have 5, and everybody says, oh my gosh, there's a crisis here. Even if it's random, that somehow gets people's attention. So Columbia, Missouri had such a situation, and they got serious and developed a Vision Zero task force. They already had a bicycle and pedestrian advisory commission just like us, which was neat that they had a place to start with. But they developed a task force, and then we'll go over what the steps are for a city to become recognized as Vision Zero. Cities are... You saw that they're cities rather than states at present. I think they will move eventually to maybe having states, and certainly the organizations like Fed Highways and so on are supportive. But 0 is just as a goal, it seems more achievable at the local level. And then the equity, social justice, public health is a very big part of this. And again, looking down below, you see those customized logos that people have devised for what fits their city. So what would the benefits to Urbana be? These are just some I thought of. I think we could probably brainstorm some others, but people generally, speed is recognized as the fundamental cause of accidents, or I'm sorry, crashes. You can be drunk, you can be on a cell phone, but if you don't combine that with speed, you're not going to kill somebody. So speed is the fundamental thing, so slowing speed down in general is going to be a fundamental approach. And slowing speed down does open up different opportunities as people are traveling through Urbana instead of using it as a speedway to get to Champaign. I think there would be a lot of opportunities to appreciate Urbana, to appreciate driving through Urbana, probably to cuss Urbana out as well. But I don't know how many people are driving through Urbana, just because they want to. So I don't know that the traffic count would actually fall if speeds were reduced throughout Urbana. Yes, Lily.
I have a quick comment about that, though. It seems like a lot of people, when I meet them and they've just recently moved to Urbana, it's because they are new to the community and they were driving through, or they heard from a real estate person or something that this is a walking, biking friendly community. And so regardless whether they owned a car or not, they would chose to go to Urbana because of that. So maybe people do choose to. I don't know.
Okay, well, just real quickly then, what are the steps to become a Vision Zero city? These are what are listed on their website as the requirements. We have to have the actual goal of eliminating traffic fatalities, getting to 0 with those statistics. The mayor has to publicly and officially commit to Vision Zero. I believe we had we did have, the city council previously had planned to commit to that, or that was a resolution anyway, to look into it. I don't think we would necessarily find any objection with the current administration. A Vision Zero plan or strategy is in place or committed to do so. And this, I have a question to the Vision Zero people, whether the bike plan and the PED plan could qualify as a strategy. I know that her initial response was that they would need to, it has to be multimodal. The plan needs to, since, as I noted, a little bit more than half of the fatalities are PED and bicycle. In fact, they were, I believe, 9 PED and 1 bike, something like that. Nevertheless, you have to be looking to reduce motor fatalities as well. And then you have to coordinate with these key city departments. It has to be across the city.
The mayor did do a special walk for Walk and Roll to School Day that was coordinated with the National Vision Zero campaign and Safe Routes to School, so she was involved in that this year.
Is it 0 fatalities or 0 crashes or 0 injuries or?
It's fatalities and severe injuries.
Okay.
Severe disabling injuries.
I just, to also add, I do think it's a really funny, interesting thing about transportation is that this is a part of American life where you can have so many fatalities and life-changing, maiming, serious injuries, and it really goes unseen, or not a lot of people think or talk about it. Whereas if we had something like this in the airline industry, or
the recent train crash.
Or food and drug problems like this, there would be a lot more public outcry. And I think it's very interesting that a lot of people see this happening every year, and in some cities every day, and it goes kind of unseen.
Yeah, I would agree. If 100 people were being killed by bikes every day, there would be there would be a large public outcry. I find it fascinating when people say, I'm very scared to bike, and I'm like, well, have you ever been in a car accident? Do you know anyone who's been in a car accident? Have you ever been injured in a car accident? Or crash. Crash. I have a hard time with that one. But yeah, it's yes. And so this is a real head shift. We've really bought into the idea that when you drive a car, if you have a crash, it's okay. That's just part of driving a car. And I find it to be very disturbing, and I do find it to be very disturbing when I see people drive irresponsibly, because they have bought into that idea that it's okay to talk on the phone and drive a car. It's like it's okay, and it's not okay. I mean, again, if if cyclists were killing 100 people a day in this country, there would be outrage. And there should be outrage that 100 people a day are being killed by cars. And that's not including accidents and the amount of money that we spend on EMT and having our police officers stand in the middle of roads and direct traffic. And I mean, this is really expensive, and this is like being put on, I hate to use the word taxpayers, but taxpayers are paying for all of this, whether you take a bus every day or whether you bike or walk every day. And specifically in Urbana, the majority of people moving in this city every day are moving on a bike. The people who live in this city, pay taxes in this city, are moving on foot, on bike, or in a bus. People are driving, but we have a large percentage of children, elderly. We have a large percentage of our residents, if not the majority of our residents, are not driving to get to and fro every day. And so I find this to be really important for quality of life and really important for community building in our city.
So Audrey, as far as like a plan or strategy, do they have model plans? I mean, I can think of a lot of things we're doing already to try to reduce crashes. The Traffic Commission is pretty much focused on that. We have police kind of targeted patrols for areas, and Public Works is reviewing accidents all the time. So is there like a more
Right. It's a very data-driven approach, and they don't have concrete guidelines right now, but they do have example plans like the one that Cynthia.
Columbia would be the most equivalent to us.
Yeah.
The other cities are much bigger.
Right. Mm-hmm.
okay.
So I do think that we are doing those things, and just pulling it together and then having this approach, this mindset that 0 fatalities are acceptable. I mean, it's just shocking, as Annie was pointing out, that here we have 56% of the fatalities are pedestrians or cyclists, which is really quite astonishing. I mean, I realize we do have a walking, and that maybe that's a good thing. It shows we're out there walking compared to the rest of the country. But
Yeah. Lily?
I think that a lot of people, especially Columbia, have taken a lot of time talking about speed limits, because even whether they're speeding over a certain, like the 80th percentile over, having a lower speed limit and being hit by a car in a lower speed has significant correlation to how well you're going to survive or fare, whether they were texting or whether they were completely conscious. And then I would hope that Urbana could take a much more rigorous approach at some of the problems were identified in the pedestrian master plan, in order to really help and reduce pedestrian fatalities, and also make this a safer city, like University Avenue or Lincoln.
Okay, Cynthia?
So it sounds like, we'll pass our pedestrian plan, but we need to have a Vision Zero strategy, because it has to also address the crashes of vehicle on vehicle. So it sounds like we need to have that in addition to the 2 plans that we already have, but we could reference all the strategies in those plans as part of what we're doing to implement it. So I think we've got a lot of it in place.
RPC, the statistics that I showed were from 2013. So RPC is probably due to update the analysis, the traffic crash analysis, pretty soon. One of the things that really bothered me about the previous 2 was that they analyzed it by road condition, by traffic controls, by weather, by age, by gender, by impairment, not by speed. Speed was not mentioned. That's just sort of a given. We all, that's a universal thing, as if it's the sun or, and
Yeah, it's from the state.
I think in the future, it's because of the state requirements.
No,
Yeah,
they get the
state,
data from the
national.
state.
Right.
Yeah,
From the
and-
state database, right.
Yeah,
So
but I
I
agree
think
with
that
you.
speed would be something that we would really want to be looking at in the future. As Lily mentioned, you could be impaired, you could be texting. If your speed is 20 miles an hour, the chance is 90% of surviving that, compared to if your speed is 40, where it's 10%.
Because the data is pulled from the crash reports. And we did a training here a few years ago where we had the engineers and law enforcement and planners and everybody come together, and were trained in doing safety audits. And part of the problem is that law enforcement often doesn't understand how critical that data is to us, and the speed of the vehicles is not, I believe, on the form at this time. So it is just not collected. And to get that changed is a much bigger process that probably has to happen at the state level for us to get that data processed. But I agree with you. I think knowing the speed of vehicles is a critical factor in reducing fatalities. And one of my frustrations with the study, like it was done on University, was that speed was not mentioned as one of the primary factors for the fatalities that we've had on that roadway. And part of the reason is because I think they don't have the data in terms of what the speed of the vehicles were that were involved in the fatalities.
Yeah, I don't know how easy that is they would at least, we should know whether they wrote a ticket for speeding, and then the speed limit on the road. I don't know if they would actually know whether, if the speed limit was 35, I don't know if they'd know whether they're going 20 or 25 or 30, or, that would be hard to get.
Excessive, they can do it, but 'cause they'd have to measure the skid marks or something to know what speed they were going.
Yeah.
Well, we do know that University is 35 through Urbana, compared to 30 through Champaign. And interestingly, Neal in downtown Champaign is 25 now, whereas they speed by at 30 on our main street. So
I forgot what I was going to say. Never mind.
Okay.
You're not alone.
Charlie, did you want
Happens to
to
the best of
jump
us.
in for a minute?
Yeah, I'll just jump in. I actually met with Sanford Hess today to try to figure out if we could update some of this data from the live data portal that the city of Urbana has. And it's sort of in there, but what he explained to me was that our police officers fill in a report to LexisNexis, and then that LexisNexis database is very difficult to work from and work with. That some of that data gets uploaded to the state, and then in turn we get stuff back from the state. So I'm actually looking at the data right now and trying to see if I can figure out anything in it and see if there is any kind of a way of pulling out any kind of speed thing, and I'll know that in a day or two.
Okay. I mean, it seems like for the fatalities, definitely, it seems like we could FOIA the police reports, and you could provide them for us. You'd
No,
have to
literally, I would
redact
have to FOIA them. Yes, because they have to be redacted of all the sensitive material, sensitive information, private information.
So it's not reported at all.
I don't know. I'm going to go. It's not in the. I didn't see it immediately in the database stuff that I looked at.
So then we have to look at the actual crash report.
You may have to look at the LexisNexis reports.
well, and again, speed. This is a comprehensive system-wide approach, so it wouldn't be just reducing the speed limit. It's designing for that speed limit, which is why I'm concerned that this is very urgent right now, because University Avenue is being designed. If we want that to be designed for 30 miles an hour or, God forbid, 25 miles an hour, the design needs to take that into consideration so that the 85th percentile is somewhere in that vicinity instead of speeding by at 42 miles an hour as they are at Main and Smith Road.
Just to add, the university's campus master plan, the final draft is already out and online, and it does mention University Avenue from Goodwin to Carl Hospital being an area where we'll be expanding our students walking down the street from engineering campus to Carl, and we'll add trees and do the things we're going to do, but we're going to have a lot more pedestrian traffic there. And I would wonder too, and I don't have these numbers off the top of my head, and I haven't looked into it, but I would wonder how many of the pedestrian fatalities there are on University Avenue. I would wonder, are there very many of the non-property damage or not very, the small crashes? Are there, or is anybody who does encounter a car as a pedestrian, are they much more likely to have a serious or a fatality issue? So
Well, I'm not sure, but I think
if we
most
increase
of these are
pedestrian
actually
traffic.
University
Yeah, I
Avenue.
can think of at least three. Just
Yeah, I
offhand
think that most
recently.
of these
Yeah.
are on
It's our
University.
primary
Yeah.
Well,
location.
what I'm saying is, if we increase pedestrian traffic, aren't we just saying that we should expect that the
Yes.
pattern of fatalities and serious injuries will just rise?
Well, it has increased 2.3 times or 2.5 times over the last 10 years
I mean,
already.
Champion's
So let
already
alone
broken
that You're
ground.
expanding the population, densifying.
Near Fourth,
Yeah.
there's north of University Avenue, but very close to it, there's Champion's already broken ground, a developer on another large housing, complex.
Well,
So
and this is another problem with
more
the IDOT
pedestrian
study. I
traffic.
don't think they're considering future,
development.
even if it's on the ground.
Okay. So as far as going forward with the Vision Zero, and I guess we're still talking to IDOT, but it sounds like they're pretty far along in that process. Our pedestrian plan, definitely we should try to see what we need to do with the other plans and other city organizations to make sure we have some kind of Vision Zero policy.
Hey, Bill, is there any chance we could request city staff to send this along to IDOT for consideration, the Urbana pedestrian plan? I don't know if that's weird.
We could request. Yeah.
Yeah, you can request anything you want.
Hey, Craig.
And then I guess maybe
The draft
Right.
or the
if-
presentation.
if you think the university master plan would be a good thing to pass along too, at least that chapter of it or that part of it, we should pass that along too.
I do know they have the the bicycle master plan. I know that. The PED is not finished, obviously.
Yeah.
It's in, its development.
But I like Bill's idea of sending the university plan. I think that's really smart. Yeah, just try to continue, and I'm sure Champaign, let them know. I mean, if there's any way to get the Champaign plan, let them know that more and more people are going to be walking, biking, and moving in this space, and we should not just prioritize the movement of vehicles.
Okay. Yeah, that was, okay. You're done, right? All right. Thanks, Audrey.
I don't know.
Very good. Next, we have some updates from Craig.
Okay, I wanted to give you folks some information of some action that was taken by the Traffic Commission here in the past week. This is more of an informational update than anything else. We had a request from a business owner on the northeast corner of University Avenue and Goodwin Avenue to look into a situation that had happened here with this building. For those of you that don't know, this corner building is where Durst Cycle is on the other side of the building, and then there's several different businesses that front a sidewalk on the east side of Goodwin Avenue. I'm going to pull up Google Map real quick here and just kind of put things in context a little bit here. So I'll switch over to the map here. Springfield, let's go up north. Looks like it's having trouble catching up. Let me zoom out and see if we can get it. We'll move it up. Okay. So the incident, there was an incident where a bicyclist had ridden on the bicycle past the side doors here at this business. Yeah, on the sidewalk. And the business owner, there was a person patronizing the business. They opened the door. The bicyclist actually ran into the door, shattered the door. So that was brought to our attention. On the west side here, there is a nice 8-foot wide bike path. This is actually a bike route, which comes down through here, this zone through here. So this was brought to the Traffic Commission. Historically, the Traffic Commission handles all regulatory signs within the city. We also provide advisement on non-regulatory, but those can be implemented by the authority of the Public Works Director. They don't have to go to the Traffic Commission. So I'll just kind of walk through a little bit here. This is the sidewalk. It's 4 foot wide, and then as you go around the corner here, it goes to 6 foot through this zone. I'm going to switch back now. As the sidewalk goes up to this parking garage, which is for the Campus Circle Apartments, which is right back here, the sidewalk does not cross the railroad tracks, so it only goes up to the parking garage. So there was some discussion on how to handle this situation. So what I wanted to bring to you folks is what the commission had recommended, which was basically a progressive type of approach versus a regulatory approach. So what the commission recommended was to basically create a dismount zone. And I'll switch it over. So this is one that is in Fort Collins, Colorado. So what we're looking at is Public Works will come up with some type of design. This particular design is unique. It's got the it's got the rollerblades, but also has the ram head for because Colorado State, is there. But we're looking at creating some type of dismount zone marking that'll be placed on the sidewalk. Let me see if I can go back here. So it'd be, say, somewhere in this zone through here, and then opposite at the other end down in here. And then likewise some signage. We're looking into that. There is some dismount zone signage. This would be a non-regulatory or non-finable, basically a voluntary dismount zone at this time. If there's another incident, though, and let's say it progresses up, then we would probably look at something that's similar to downtown, where there would be no bikes or an actual regulatory signs. But that's the step that we're taking here. This particular location, the business owner was welcome to the idea of doing this with the paint on the sidewalk, and we felt that that was probably a good way. I'll go back to this one here. A good way to at least step into this and try to take care of that situation. What we're also going to do is as you go to the north here, there's a sign here that says bike route to the north, but there's really nothing up here in the corner that says go to the west. So we're going to look at some signage there, additional bike route signage to help people know that's where they should go. Of course, in this particular case, they were likely not using the bike route, but going to a destination. So I wanted to bring that forward to you so that when you folks see it, this will be the first location like that in Urbana.
So, yeah, that sounds like it would work in that corner. But really, I mean, if you're going north, you want to get over to the other side if you want to use the bike path, or else just start using the road on North Goodwin because it's not as busy. Is that 3 lanes on the south side there? There's a right turn, left turn, and center lane?
Yeah.
Is there
It's
any way
actually
to
4
encourage, and then go just a little bit south, is there a way to get off the sidewalk, off the route there onto the road? That, I see some concrete there about, 100 feet north of Clark Street.
Oh, you mean like right through
Yeah,
here?
is that a curb cut, that thing right there?
That would be a curb cut, yeah.
So
That
you
is a
could
curb.
potentially get off and onto the road there if you wanted to get over, make a cross and left.
Right.
Would
Right.
it be worth doing something to encourage people to do that?
We could. The bike route is actually officially designated on the multi-use path. The one issue up here, and of course this would be addressed with the university project, cities requested bike detection on the north. Like currently right now, if a bicyclist comes up, particularly at this location, the signals would not pick them up, so they would not have detection. That's why they're over here, and then, but the new signal systems will pick up bicyclists, and yes, then they could go across. The business owner actually wanted some type of diagonal crossing through here, which is, of course, this intersection is controlled by the Department of Transportation, not the City of Urbana, which they would not go with something like that. That would require what they call a ped scramble, which is what you see on campus.
And there aren't enough PEDs there to qualify for that.
No.
What about, do you think they'd be willing to consider 2-stage left turns?
They could look into it. I don't think that with the volume that it would probably, I don't know if they would.
They would go for it.
Yeah.
So I was thinking if we could use the system that we've got other places where we could use the right turn lane for the cyclists to continue through and then have the two-stage left turn for them. That would be a system that would be more comfortable. Not very many of those cyclists are going to go into that left turn lane and then make a left turn onto University and get on the side path. I think that that's probably too intimidating. But if they could go straight across and get into a box to do a pedestrian left turn, then that would be more comfortable. But I love having the dismount zone on there. I think that's great.
We have some information that the person that was involved was a student that had residency over here. So with that in mind, even if they got on the road, they're still probably going to come over and try to get back. And a lot of the students feel more comfortable on, off the road than on, particularly at this location. But I wanted to bring it forward because this will lead into, some of the discussion on the next item a little bit too. So, any other questions then?
Don't buildings like that open right onto a sidewalk normally have a recessed entryway that the door swings out within the recessed area, not right out onto the sidewalk?
I don't have. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have that answer. I'm not.
Arrangement to me, and if I were the student, I would be extremely angry about that.
I don't
Even
know
if
if
I
that's
was a
requirement.
pedestrian, I would be extremely angry about that.
Yeah.
And I just think that the zoning commission could perhaps look at having an ordinance. If the building is flush with the sidewalk, the entryway should be recessed.
Of course, the problem is, right, and the pedestrian would be stepping out, they would hit them instead of the door. Well, the City of Champagne's ordinance says that if, in the central business district, if the building is up to the property line, bicycles are not allowed on the sidewalk. So that might be something we would want to look at for this area of town, because we've had so much development in here, and a lot of it is coming straight up to the property line. And in those cases, you just don't have space for people unless it's extra wide and built for that, to have people zooming through on a bicycle. So if this doesn't, solve the problem, that might be a next step to take a look at.
I think a dismount zone is essentially saying no bike riding on the sidewalk. I don't think we ever want to outlaw walking bikes on a sidewalk.
Right.
No, I'm not saying you.
Okay.
No. I was saying that you can ride just like downtown right now, you can't ride on the sidewalk if the building is right up next. So in
Right.
Champaign.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah, in
sense.
Champaign, if you're not right downtown, but you're close to it and the buildings are up to the property line, it's still not legal for you to be on the sidewalk there.
I think that's a good idea, but I believe in Urbana, all the entryways are recessed. I don't think the doors swing right out onto the sidewalk, even though we do also, as an additional measure, have no bike riding on the sidewalks, which is good.
Might be
But this is a death waiting to happen. I mean, this is kind of nuts to have a glass door swing out onto a sidewalk.
Annie.
I did not even know there was a path on the other side of the street there at Goodwin. I have biked down this street. I biked down once with a very strong cyclist, and she was just like, don't worry, it's the two of us, and we have every right to be on the road, and cars, and it's by that Durst cyclist and I've also, we did a lunar cycle ride with a bunch of cyclists, and I've never once seen this 8-foot path on the other side. I had no idea that even existed.
It actually goes all the way
Yeah,
up
it
to
goes up.
Bradley Avenue.
Yeah, I had
it goes
no
all
id-
the way up to our new bike
One
lanes that we
north
have.
and one south.
Yeah, I honestly had no idea that
All
was
the way
even
up
there.
there,
So
yeah.
there's clearly aside from putting signage on the sidewalk saying don't. Yeah, there's clearly nothing telling a cyclist. I would suggest, obviously, you put a share road on the ground that says a cyclist is allowed to bike on the street there on that narrow side. But definitely we need to let cyclists know that the way to get, I guess, the way to find that other thing, that other 8-foot path, is you have to put up signs on the road and on the side path
Yeah,
that
so
say
right
you gotta cross somehow to
Yeah, so
find,
there are these bike route signs.
Yeah, it's not on the road, though. When I'm
Right,
riding my
understand.
bike on the road, I don't even see it. And when you're on the road there, you're not looking at signs. You're just trying to stay alive. So,
Well, like Cynthia
Yeah.
said, perhaps our wayfinding that we do will
Yeah.
help with that.
so that would be my suggestion. Is I honestly did not know that was an 8-foot. That doesn't look like 8 feet, but I guess it is. It's 8 feet. I didn't know that was there, because I would have happily ridden that the multiple times that I tried riding down Goodwin, I just don't bike there anymore because I think it's crazy. But yeah, if somehow we could get, because I don't really see signs connecting, you know, that would get me across that intersection somehow to that path.
Right.
I mean, I guess you'd do 2 crosswalks maybe is the way to do it, or I don't really know.
Yeah,
I mean,
they-
you have to break the law to do it. You have to cross, I guess. Maybe
This
I don't
crosswalk
know.
is wide, and this one's wide, but these other 2 are narrow.
Yeah, but I think mostly I've been in the road, so I would not have even known that. I didn't even know there was an 8-foot path. I was in the road on my bike because I didn't know I could ride my bike on the sidewalk there. Yeah, and then I didn't know there was a 8-foot path on the other side. But anyway, and so that's why I would put a share road there at least, because it might slow down cars, maybe not. I don't know. But anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, does Campus Circle have a internal newsletter or something that they could at least kind of warn cyclists not to use that, or that they'll have to dismount when they get to that sidewalk, and encourage them to either do that or switch the road till they get up to the entrance? I think their bike parking is in the garage there.
Right.
I know when we approved that, they offered to put bike parking in the garage so it would be close to the bike route, because originally they had something clear over to on the east side, but then people would have been using the sidewalk along University and crossing 4 or 5 exit points there.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I'm not aware if they have a newsletter, but that's a good point. We could, you know, it's going to be too late to put anything in right now because of the weather, but even though we've been having great weather, but it'll probably be in the spring, and then we could, you know, send something to them to let
And-
them know.
You know, they are 2 ways. Like, it's a 2-way bike path on both sides, so you're going to definitely have to have signs on both. You know,
Right.
the sign, whatever signs you put up. You know, not only put the please walk your bike sign, but also put up a sign that says, you know, bike path over here, bike path over here. You know, like, don't just say don't walk, don't ride your bike, but let people know, because it has to be 2 ways. Because if this is an 8-foot path, it's a 2-way bike path. You know, so people have to see it coming and going on both sides if you're trying to get people to actually use the bike path, which I assume I totally would prefer to use. So that would be the other wayfinding thing.
Audrey.
Going back to this door topic, this reminds me that I just noticed in the new coffee shop in Champaign, which is also up on the property line, the door swings in, a glass door, and I thought everybody who goes to that door tries to push it out, because doors normally push out.
Fire code.
And they had to put a sign up and everything, and the door swings in, and now I understand why. It was it's right up to the property line, and that's right next to it is the bike shop with the door recessed, like normal doors should be. It's so, you know, that one can swing out, but it strikes me that there's a slight deficiency in the Urbana zoning, or whoever it is takes care of these minimal design requirements. Yeah.
Building code.
I mean, that seemed very strange, and now it all makes sense why that door swings in.
Okay, thanks. Do you want to do the next topic?
Yeah, we can segue into that one. So I wasn't present at the previous meeting. Brad Bennett had filled in for me on that, and I'm going to give you a little background. What happened was a business owner approached a city alderman about concerns about bicyclist riding in downtown Urbana, and basically was the business owner and the alderman were asking the traffic commission to come up with a way to discourage bicyclists from riding on the sidewalk. So city staff discussed that internally and felt that there was already an existing ordinance that is in place, and there's some signage, and the thought was to come to BPAC to get some advice, because most of you are world travelers or have ridden all over in various cities, about what your thoughts were to help the situation out. In turn, I did a little bit of research, and I found that when this ordinance was initially enacted, signs were put up that said basically, please walk your bike. And they were up for a couple years. And it was found that they did not work. So at that time, there was needed to be a stronger message. Hence, that's what the sign that's out there now. So that's kind of where we're at today. We don't have the resources to do a count or pull crash data at this location. It really came down to really what advice does the bicycling community have as far as education or a way to get it out, information out, to keep bicyclists from riding downtown. Another step, if it would have been to the Traffic Commission, another traditional step would be to say, well, we would ask police to do enforcement. So what we're trying to do is not necessarily jump right to that, which then usually is a rash of tickets, and then there's some negative publicity, and everybody's up in arms. It was more so, let's come back or go to you folks, and let's talk about this a little bit. Is there some way to do that? The sign is pretty bold. It does say, it gets the impression that, you can't have a bike on this road or this sidewalk here. The ordinance actually says not riding a bike. It doesn't say walking a bike, that you can't walk a bike. So I thought maybe we'd bring this back up and kind of talk about it now that I'm back involved in it.
Yeah, I asked you to bring this up again just because I wondered what had been done about it, because we did make some suggestions about the signs that say please walk your bike, but we weren't aware of the fact that had been tried. I don't remember those signs. Do you remember if it just said please you walk your bike, or did it have any kind of image like the ones we provided as examples? I don't know.
I don't. That was before my time. The language I saw in the documents, it either said please walk your bike or walk your bike.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Do you recall, Cynthia?
Yeah, I think it said walk your bike, and it may have said please, but I would like to suggest that as part of our wayfinding plan, we include a design for dismount zone signage on sidewalks. However, I know at one point they had that on the sidewalks down here, and there were complaints, and they were removed. The business owners complained about them.
Right.
So we can't have it both ways. If they want us to help them with the signage, I believe that the on-sidewalk messaging is going to be enormously more effective. And if we had a standard design that was part of the plan that we can then utilize in locations where this is a problem, I think that those are fine. And I think it would be, whichever message or design we want as part of that plan, I think that would really be helpful. The education effort, we can do that, but it is not going to solve the problem because there are not very many people doing it. And often the people I see doing it are people it would be very difficult for us to reach with an education program. Similarly, I think enforcement is going to be difficult too because it doesn't happen very often.
Correct.
And, the police, we've got really serious problems hanging around downtown waiting for someone to ride their bike on the sidewalk is not going to be a high priority, especially when we don't know that anybody's been hurt. I mean, the most serious crash we've heard about with this is the one you just described on Goodwin. So it is a serious problem, especially with some of the older people and people who have mobility issues that are going in and out of the shoe store because they are stepping out onto the sidewalk and a zooming bike could really seriously injure them. So I really think that it would be helpful for us to have a standard design, have it be part of our wayfinding, and then there needs to be discussion with the business owners about this is the solution that we think will work best so that we don't have a problem of it being taken back out after the fact.
You are correct that it's my understanding that there were some markings put on the sidewalk. I think they got about 2 down, and then it all broke loose, and it was ceased, is my understanding. There were some pretty important people, I guess, that stopped it, so it just stopped. So, I don't-
So were they worried that having a dismount zone encourages people to ride their bike on the sidewalk in the first place?
is my understanding,
They
it
thought
was
they were
just
ugly.
ugly. Yeah, they
Oh.
didn't want the. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think if we back up to what we just discussed with the other location, maybe if we're able to come up with something and we can at least start that could be a good, so to
That
speak,
could be a
pilot.
pilot
Yeah.
study.
And then if we can couple that with a sign, some communities, like this one down here with the blue circle, that's in Longwood, California, they have some of those.
I like the dismount zone with the bike and the skateboard. I think
Skateboard.
that's very clear, simple.
Right.
Audrey?
Right.
What about taking the Neal Street approach and making the speed limit 25 miles an hour so people will be encouraged to bicycle in the street? People will be encouraged to look and see what shops there are along our lovely Main Street, downtown Urbana. And maybe it will
great.
make all the shop owners so happy that
Yeah, I
they
think
will
having
no
a reduced
longer
speed
be
limit on Main would be
complaining
great.
about the bicycles on the street.
Absolutely.
Oh, yep, Lily?
I second that. That's awesome. Let's do that.
Absolutely.
That should be. I also just wanted to mention that I as a person who does education campaigns for that it would be really hard to reach the few people that an enforcement campaign would be really a stretch of how effective it would be. Like, and how many rash of tickets we could possibly scramble up when it's such a scattered issue. And this signs, we all know signs have a hard time catching people's attention, especially on poles. And that's a problem, and sign glut is also a problem too as well. And if we had something on the sidewalk, I know that frequently the biggest complaint about having something on the sidewalk is that it rubs off. But on sidewalks with pedestrian traffic, wears off. I mean, it'll hold up for a little while. And so, I think the issue at hand, it might have a much more significant improvement than the cost.
Yeah, I
so.
mean, I think if they complain, we have to educate the business owners too, that cyclists look at the sidewalk, they don't look at poles. And if you want them to see the sign, it's going to have to be on the sidewalk.
So you folks think that would probably be the most effective way to reach them? Okay.
Yeah, I would, Bill, though. I think it'd be a good idea to show the business owners a range of designs and just get their initial feedback. I mean, maybe the sidewalk painting was ugly before. Like, that one in the second row on the middle is hideous.
The military.
I'd be
military
pissed
chic.
about that. Yeah. Yeah, but so just
I
get,
think it
people's
was. I think it
feedback.
was just words. Yeah. Okay, well, this is the kind of feedback that I was looking for. Any other questions then?
Yeah.
I was just thinking, that to me it makes sense to go back to them and say, here are the things that work, but also just to kind of focus on okay, then get the people riding in the road. They have their bikes, they're there. Let's find ways to get them in the street where it's going to work better. And then here are the suggestions. We'll just forget that you found them ugly before. These are the things that work. If you don't like anything, that is not our problem.
Okay, so we'll try to come up with some ideas. I think it would probably be good to bring it back to this commission so you guys could see some of these designs or ideas prior to us taking them out, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Then who's going to talk about the BPAC annual report?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
I
the-
requested.
Who elected me?
I requested it be put on there because I thought we should discuss ahead of time who we wanted to have work on our annual report. In the annual report, did we do it on calendar or fiscal year?
Calendar year?
I thought we did calendar year, so we should talk about. Last time, several people volunteered, and everybody did portions of it, and then I put it all together. So however you want to do it, we can update. It'll be easier. We've got the one we did before. We can update that or change it, whatever you want to do, if you want to take a look at it. But I thought since calendar year is ending, we should talk about how we were going to get it together and send it to them. I think it's also easier maybe to get on the agenda with city council earlier in the year than when we get towards budget time.
Mm-hmm.
It gets a very busy agenda later on, and they don't really want to hear from us very much.
Yeah. Do you remember when you presented last year? Was it like March or?
It was later because it was
We
our
started
it was
later.
our first report,
Oh, okay.
which was unique, a collaboration, I think, and it just we weren't sure exactly all the pieces of the puzzle. But now we have Cynthia and I think it was Audrey that are experts at it now. So
It was easier than I thought it would be, because basically you go through the minutes and.
Annie did the final.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
yeah,
right.
Annie did the
that's
awesome.
right. Andy was the true expert.
Well, the polish.
sit back further and further.
You did the polish, but basically it wasn't that hard to look through and say, okay,
Right.
what
What did we
happened?
do?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and it's all in the minutes, but it's just, you know, it's totally doable.
I will absolutely volunteer to do the graphic design for this.
And
Not
I
a
can
problem.
help, but I don't want to do all of it. So Sue, Audrey, Cynthia.
I can help. I helped last
Lily.
time. It'll be like a potluck. We'll all sign up for certain months. That's what we kind of did
That's
last
what we
time.
did last time, yeah.
Bill will put it together, and Annie will make the Instagram account for it.
Okay, so how about if I try to, do you have the electronic copy of the previous one? If you
We
could
do.
send that to, well, it's online. Well, no, it's just a PDF, isn't it?
Yeah, I could send you the PowerPoint. And what Cynthia did last year was she assigned different people different months, and they went through they went through the months and they highlighted what they thought was important, and then Cynthia looked at what they thought was important and then shifted it down a little further. But I can send you the PowerPoint of
Okay.
what I did, and you can look through it at
Why don't
least.
you do that, and I'll try to make a first draft update and then send it around to the people that volunteered, Sue, Annie, Lily, and Cynthia. Anybody else?
Sue,
Sue.
Audrey.
Sue.
You had a team.
Sue.
Oh,
Okay,
Bill, we won't have all the minutes approved until the January meeting, so
okay. That'll
FYI.
give me a little break then. Okay. All right, I'll get that started next month. Commission meeting dates for next year, do we have those?
yeah, there's a handout.
Oh, it's on here.
There's just one correction on there. The August date should be August 21st. But it's the third Tuesday of every month.
Do we
And then
need
do you want to talk about
approve?
January meeting, just so they're in
Oh,
the
right,
order?
in the January meeting, we have a holiday that Monday. City Council will meet on Tuesday, so we're moving our meeting to Wednesday.
Everything gets moved over a day?
Yeah,
Okay. Do we need to approve this?
yes,
Okay.
please,
So I just need a motion to approve these meeting dates?
correct.
So
I second that.
moved by Cynthia, seconded by Lily. Any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Announcements. Anyone have announcements? Cynthia?
so I gave everybody a copy of our, we put together a sheet of the benefits of bicycling. And the work that I've been doing, hoping to do with some of the immigrant organizations in town to offer bicycle education and access to bikes. We also felt like it would be helpful for them to know that transportation can cost considerably less if they access transit and bicycling. And something people often don't think about, in addition, when people come into our country from other places and think about buying a car, they do not know how much it's going to cost. And they often end up buying cars that take a lot of maintenance, and it's a big, expensive process for them. So we pulled this data. The Center for Neighborhood Technology has the Housing and Transportation Housing Affordability Index, and we literally can go by census block and track and tell you how much people in that area are spending on transportation and how many average cars per household, et cetera. So there was a whole lot more data than we put on here. But we tried to provide a couple of comparison points, and you can see in Campus Town, the total, they recommend that people's transportation and housing expenses be 30, maximum 40% of your budget. And you can see here that in Campus Town, they're hitting 35, which is really good. And, but on Bradley, in Champaign, Bradley to 74, that's, you can see a little red outline of the area that was included. It's 42%, and then in the area north of 74 in Urbana, it's 63% of their household income goes for housing and transportation costs. And so it's just to give people information, so as they make decisions about housing, location, and transportation, they at least have that information. And then we did the little thing on the annual costs of driving, and you can see the annual cost for a vehicle is $10,220. And we spent some time digging around on the bicycle annual cost, by the way, and this was a number we asked some other experts about that and came up with $200 a year if you buy a bike and then maintain it. And then, of course, the annual bus pass is $84. So that we thought that information would be useful to people. And then we thought for some people, the issue of their impact on the environment is important. So the back side has information on the benefits of commuting by bike compared to other modes. And so you can see the difference between average cars, new cars, buses, and bicycles, which are zero emissions. And then how many gallons of gas per year, basically, that bicycles use no fuel and they reduce traffic on the road. There was also a statistic that said it's 50% faster to travel by a bike than a car during rush hour, but we weren't sure that was actually true
I
here,
believe that.
depending on where you live. I think if you live in Urbana, and closer into the core, it probably is 50% faster to go by bike than to drive or even take a bus. But if you live farther out, distance really has an impact on that statistic. So we just put in that was it's usually faster. So I just wanted to share this with you all because we also want to do a teenage version of it. And so if you know people who do material development for that age group that have any tips for us, we would love to hear that, because this is clearly not going to be very interesting or jazzy for teenagers, and we wanted to take a look at that. If you have other suggestions, we're happy to hear them. We ran this by about 8 or 10 people so far at MTD. Yes.
Yeah, Audrey.
Was the income that this was normalized by, was that income specific to those ages? Or is it a single income for the whole thing?
I think it was average income for the community is what I remember, but I'd have to go back and look. I think it was based on average household income for the community at large. Yeah.
Okay.
Community or for that particular?
No, I think for the community. Yeah, I think so.
That would make more sense, because I know that on the campus area, and a lot of students don't have income or jobs, and usually when you do any kind of income-based thing, it's their housing is like 70-80% of their income or
yeah,
more.
No, it's, yeah, I think it's based on average household income for the community, but the transportation costs are by the specific area that. And so that in that regard, you could say the analysis is flawed, but it gives you a point of reference to contemplate if you live in one area to another. Is basically what we were trying to show people.
Okay.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and the other thing too, in Campus Town, even though your transportation costs would be really low, housing options for families are pretty non-existent, and also the housing costs are higher, because the students rent places at different rates and have roommates, et cetera. So that's another factor in this, is that people, so a family says, gosh, I want to live here because it's going to cost less for us, but for them to find housing in the area would probably be extremely difficult. And it also might not be ideal. It might be loud on weekends. with parties and things. People don't want to live in those areas, so.
I think one of the time savings for me riding to campus for work is parking and walking.
Yes.
Because you can park your bike
Yes.
within, 50 yards at
Exactly.
least of your door instead of 4 or 5 blocks and walking
Yes.
the last 4 or 5 blocks. Plus the time saved scraping your windshield in the morning from ice. So.
If I'm going to campus, I try and ride my bike. If the weather is intimidating me, then I ride the bus. I try not to drive. On rare occasions, I drive to campus just because I don't want to deal with parking.
And is the annual cost of parking on campus like $700?
It's
No.
capped at
That
660.
depends on who you are and what your income is.
It's capped at 660.
What does that mean?
So the chancellor gets paid a bunch of money, and he pays $660 a year.
But if you make $10,000 a year, your
pay
your annual
very
parking
little.
fee is very low.
Yeah.
It's income based.
That's how we do the bike parking
Not
too,
the
right?
market rate for parking.
Any other announcements?
These are being negotiated soon on campus, so whatever.
We can talk about Green Street.
Yeah, just,
Oh, Craig.
I'll just give an update on the M4 project. We're nearing winter shutdown. They're still working in the Urbana section over at Lincoln and Green near the gas stations. They're actually planning on working all the way up till Christmas. It might be even past that. Trying to get ahead for next year, but you might, if you get a chance, drive down near the Union. The new transit island's there. It's pretty neat. We've got a little bit of kinks that we got to work out and things like that, and we still have some more striping to put down and things like that, and the 2-stage turn boxes that Cynthia wants to talk about in the future here. But it's pretty much shut down. But the actual now Green Street is fully open from Neal all the way to Lincoln, or Busey, so you can actually go through for the winter period till we start again, probably
Yeah.
in March or April or so.
Okay.
So I've driven on it, and I've been biking on it every morning because I've just been a little concerned about biking home from the university through Urbana because there's no like dedicated bike space on Illinois or Green Street. But so I thought, well, one really safe thing for me to do will be to bike actually on the Green Street on the new infrastructure. So I've redesigned my bike route to bike on it. And first off, the areas that are done for the bike infrastructure are fantastic. You're raised a little bit above traffic. I feel like the sight lines are really good for like if I see pedestrians coming, like I feel like I've been given a good heads up to slow down. There's fences up for when people get off the buses so they don't just like spill into the bike lane. And then I just only have 2 questions because I'm not sure if I'm doing it right. When I'm biking down Green Street, should I be biking down Green Street or should I not be biking down Green Street? Like I was like, I don't know where there's not a bike lane, like from Lincoln to Goodwin. Am I supposed to be biking there or should I not be biking? Like I can't decide. And also I've seen a lot more pedestrians crossing the streets there now that the streets are narrowed and it's really dark. So I've just noticed a lot more pedestrians, but that was just my question is I didn't know if we were going to put in like a share road there or if maybe I'm supposed to not be biking there and I'm missing something.
Well, right now, the road is in its temporary stage.
You're-
So right now, there's just 2 lanes of traffic on Green between Goodwin and Lincoln. That's it. There's no bike facilities. So, I mean, can you bike? Sure. Go ahead and bike.
Is that okay?
Bike through the winter, enjoy it until March and April. Now, when
Yeah.
we get done, there will be bike lanes.
But
on
is
that
there a
section.
bike lane somewhere? Like I've kind of noticed as I approach Goodwin, I'm like, I think there is a bike lane. Like I could pop off.
There are some things have been built, but we're trying to keep everybody off of that south half at this time.
Okay.
'Cause there's
Even though,
elevation changes that for safety reasons.
like the old timey infrastructure. Is there old timey infrastructure on?
No,
Green?
it's
On the north
abandoned.
side.
Oh, never.
And,
Okay,
and
great.
we've
Okay.
we've scraped off.
I just want to make sure I'm
a
not being
lot.
because I
Yeah.
hate that when you're like you're biking along and there's a car behind you and then you realize there's a bike lane next to you and you aren't using it and you're like, I feel like a fool.
It's-
side path.
Right.
Okay, got
yeah.
it. All right.
It
and
was
then-
more of like a people walking it substandard side path.
And then
so
if I
keep
want to
biking
take
in
a
the road.
left, like when I get up to, when I get up to like, I call it Ragstock. What's that street? Ragstock.
Right.
Right. When I get up to Wright Street, and if I'm on the bike lane and I'm taking a left heading towards campus, that doesn't make any sense. Does that make sense? Am I supposed to like hop onto the street?
Yes. Yes, you should.
Okay.
You should hop onto the street.
I didn't know if I was
and go
supposed to like stay on the bike lane all the way up to Wright Street and then like
left. If you
kinda
were
go
going-
left there,
If you were
or-
going right or straight, you could stay on the,
bike lane.
if you're
Okay.
going left, though, you want to move over into the left turn.
Where it's like the road gets thinner.
Yeah.
Okay, again,
Two-stage left turns there.
Right.
Eventually,
Yes.
and then you can use that.
Yes. Yes.
And that's a good segue into the next topic, future topics. I think January, we have scheduled a couple of things from Cynthia. One is going to be the public education part of the MCOR infrastructure.
Yeah, I think we need to develop an education campaign for the public, for all roadway users, so that everyone understands how those are supposed to work. There are some videos out there, and I did a call on 2 national listservs, people who should know about the best ones, and I got nothing. It wasn't very helpful, but so we can take a look at that ourselves. But I think we should talk about how we can best reach everybody and provide that information. Of course, we'll use websites and social media. And MTD is interested in this because we need people to understand how to use that to avoid crashes with the buses. And I just want us to take a look at our options and think about how we can help. I want to do it before it's in, because if you get people new infrastructure without telling them how to use it, it usually results in an uproar, as people get very confused.
Good idea. Oh, yeah, Lily.
Annie, if it would be okay with you, could you do an update about or a report back on Imbibe Urbana's summer street closures and programming, and how successful or some of the things that were successful about it, and what maybe Imbibe Urbana was thinking about doing in the future, or if we're going to keep doing that and present on some of that?
I will talk to Kristen Walters and see if she can do that. I am not exactly doing Imbibe Urbana anymore, but I can see if Kristen is available to do that, and I'm sure she would happily do it. So I would happily add that to the, but I have to talk to Kristen and make sure she's available. But yes, all right.
And then also in January, we have some updates, or some things scheduled, or potentially scheduled from Regional Planning Commission, right? They might have the draft of the pedestrian master
Oh, good.
plan.
They'll have some things to report on that. They'll
Okay.
also have a report on the Kickapoo Rail Trail Weaver Park connectivity study.
Right.
At least some information about the status of that,
And wayfinding.
and as well as the bike wayfinding. Yes.
Bill,
So,
I may actually not be here for the January meeting. It sounds like there's a whole lot on that agenda, so we should probably talk about the 2-stage left turns in February.
Okay. I think okay.
Yeah,
I think
we
that
had
was the
talked
plan,
about
yeah,
that,
okay.
and with all that on the agenda,
quite a bit in
people
January,
will not
yeah.
want to talk about that after we've gone through the amount of information you're referring to.
And then I'd given some people that were interested in it some census statistics. I work quite a bit with census data, so I was going to do a little short report on what kind of information you can get on bicycling from the census. But I could do that written and provide it in January, and then if we want to talk about it or have questions in February, we could do that. So, because it looks like January is going to be pretty packed. Any other future topics people want to bring up? All right. Happy holidays. No, we don't. I can just say we're adjourned.